Hello, this is Muho from Osaka. The next question is a question about anti-natalism. I don't know if you have ever heard about it. I heard about it, I think, for the first time around 2 years ago. It's a philosophy that says that it would have been best to not be born into the world in the first place. So, in a way you could say it's a disaster, or at least it's something negative that we've been born into the world. So you could say, well, you can always kill yourself, but killing yourself also will inflict pain on you and other beings. So many anti-natalists say, well, suicide is also not an option. It would have been best to not be born into the world. But you cannot change the fact. But something that you can think about is if you want to bring other human beings into this world, if you want to become a father or a mother, and an anti-natalist would say no. You have a moral responsibility to not father or mother children. Don't have children, because you're gonna cause harm for them. You're gonna cause suffering by having children. And in recent years, I think it's a philosopher from South Africa who's especially popular by the name of Benatar. I never read any books by this person, Benatar himself, but I read stuff about him and what he says. And he seems to bring forth the so-called argument of asymmetry, an argument that I honestly don't understand. But it seems to run like this. Like Buddhism claims that life is suffering. And others like Schopenhauer seem to say similar things. But Benatar doesn't say that life is necessarily suffering. In life there's good things and there's bad things. Sometimes there's joy and sometimes there's suffering. And for some people at the end of their life, joy will outweigh the suffering. And they might feel good about the fact that they've been born into this world. And for others it's the other way around. For them the suffering outweighs the joy. And they might, well, regret that they've been born into the world in the first place. So when you become a parent, when you decide to have kids, you cannot know if your kids will, at the end of their lives, experience more joy than suffering or more suffering than joy. So it's a kind of like a gamble. You might cause joy for another human being, but you could also be causing harm. And if on the other hand you decide not to have kids, that means you're not producing any joy, but also you're not causing any harm. And the argument that Benatar makes, the so-called asymmetry argument, is that from common sense it seems that, well, if you're not having kids, by not causing any harm to them, you could say you're doing something good for the world. But also you're preventing joy to come in the world. So by that you're doing harm, in a sense, by not having kids. You're doing something good by avoiding suffering, but you're doing something bad by preventing joy. But Benatar says, no, there's asymmetry here. You're doing something good by avoiding the pain, but you're not causing any harm by not giving birth to that person, because there is no person in the first place. So there is no owner of the joy. So how could that be called calling harm? By not having children, you're not causing any harm, but you're actually doing something good because you're preventing pain. And I honestly, I don't understand why this asymmetry should work. But let's put that aside for a while and maybe assume that anti-natalism is right. I don't understand why it should be right, but let's assume natalism is right and get to the question. Dear Muho, thank you for these videos. Thank you for watching. I drop in and out of watching regularly, but I often enjoy your perspective. For the first time, I would like to ask your thoughts on a question I wonder about. Why is anti-natalism, meaning the ethical reasoning for not having children, more prominent in Buddhist philosophies of any tradition that I know of? I have the feeling that in the question there's a word missing, that the questioner actually wants to ask, why is anti-natalism not more prominent? Because otherwise the rest of the question wouldn't make sense. I have the feeling that the questioner himself is an anti-natalist, but also drawn to Buddhism. And he's kind of wondering, why are there so many Buddhists that seem to be no anti-natalists? Why is not every Buddhist an anti-natalist? Because Buddhism is teaching that life is suffering. How come that there's Buddhists like Muho, for example, who have kids? How can anybody be so irresponsible to have children and allow them to suffer? I think that's the question here. I'm quite certain that an unborn person will struggle less than a manifest person with dukkha. Not at all, to be precise. So if somebody's not born, then he's not going to experience suffering. I'm aware there are practical reasons. So why is it not considered merciful to prevent birth? Why do Buddhists still have children? I'm aware there are practical reasons. First and foremost, our biological programming and the widespread discomfort with this line of thought. I hope it does not make you, as a father, uncomfortable. Also, one would have to think about how to deal with a shrinking population in regards to taking care of the elderly, which is why it makes sense that this was not a prominent idea historically. Nowadays, however, a smaller population with less consumption, especially in rich countries, would certainly greatly benefit our natural surroundings that need healing from the destructive impact of our collectively heedless society. Of course, I think that having children is okay, just as not having children is okay. Everyone has to decide for themselves. But wouldn't you agree there is a cause for more of a conversation here in order even think about this possibility to prevent suffering? I don't understand everything in this question, but I would like to use the remaining time to think about why not all Buddhists are anti-natalists. For example, how about Theravada monks? Would they teach their lay supporters to not have children? I don't think so. Or maybe they are. But I would be surprised, because for many Orthodox Buddhists, the teaching of reincarnation is true. That means there are 6 realms. Hell, Buddhist hell. The realm of hungry ghosts, which are always dissatisfied. The realm of beasts, animals, who are slaves to their desires. The realm of angry ghosts, which are always fighting with each other. The realm of human beings, which are basically all of the 4, but they are also sometimes coming to their senses, and they can be rational. They become aware that they are suffering and that they are causing their own suffering. and there's also a way out of suffering. Those are human beings. So in a way, human beings are the closest to salvation because they awake to Dukkha. They can find the reason of Dukkha and they can practice the Eightfold Path. And then the fifth realm is the heavenly realm, which is the most pleasurable. But according to Buddhism, it's very difficult to find salvation in the heavens, because in heaven you don't suffer. And you don't realize, you forget that you're still part of karma. You're still in the karmic realm. So heavenly beings don't practice the Eightfold Path. They don't strive for enlightenment because they forget about suffering. It's only at the end of their existence that they start to become bored and sick. But then their life in heaven has already ended and they return to the lower realms. So according to this orthodox Buddhist teaching, and I'm not a strict adherent of that, but I think a lot of both Theravada Buddhists as also Tibetan Buddhists believe in this. If you believe in this, you need human beings so that all living beings can be saved. Buddhism tries to keep the door open for all living beings to be saved. And for the other 5 realms to be saved, humanity has to remain until the last day. So Buddhists, unless they are monks, should, from that perspective, have kids so that other forms of existence have the opportunity to be born into this world as humans and eventually find salvation. But I'm going to return to this next time.